Hello! Today I want to walk you through how to create sermon notes for your Tithely Church app. So I'm logged into the Tithely dashboard, and over here you can see you have the sermon notes option on the left. I'm going to go ahead and select that. It will take me into all of the notes that I've posted so far. So you can see I have 3 notes that I have posted in the past. If you haven't posted any sermon notes yet, then this area will be blank. But either way, what we're going to go to right now is the new sermon note option right here. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And you can see right here at the top of the screen, I have some initial information that I can enter for my sermon. So first of all, I want to enter a title, which is going to be Finding God in the Forest. Yay, the forest. All right, so there's the title, and I'm also going to enter an author, which is Pastor John. And it's a good idea to always have a title and an author if you can. The author will normally be the speaker for the sermon. And the reason that I say you should have both of those is, well, you're always going to want to have a title, but having an author makes it so when people look through the list of sermons that are in the app, it always shows the title of the sermon as well as the author so they can see who spoke for that sermon. And if you don't have an author, the area below the title is going to be blank, leaving a blank space below there, so it kind of adds a bit of unevenness. So whenever possible, including both of those is always a good idea. For the subtitle, that's just something that shows up at the top of the sermon notes when you're looking at the sermon notes. So it's not nearly as necessary, but it looks nice to have it if you want to have it there. Next up, you see you have the banner image link right here. And this is the banner that shows at the top of the sermon. This makes the sermon notes look really nice. So I'm going to quickly grab something for that. Remember, this is about finding God in the forest. So let's go ahead and Google forest, and I'm going to look for images. And let's just go ahead and look at this first image. I'm going to grab a link to it and go back, and I'm just going to paste that link here. Now, obviously, I just grabbed something randomly at Google. It would probably be a good idea to find something that's actually legal to use for sure, but there's great resources out there like Unsplash and Pixabay where you can easily grab free images and search just like I did by something like forest, get an image and paste it in here. So that's going to make it so that picture shows up at the top of our sermon notes. The last thing here before we dive into the notes themselves is the Bible version. So what the Bible version is within the sermon notes you can type out a reference like John space 3:8-10. So John 3:8-10. And when you do that, then when someone views the sermon notes within the app, it's going to look like it's a hyperlink. So someone can touch that reference and a pop-up will appear within the app showing the actual scripture for that reference. And what you're choosing here is what version of the Bible should show up when that pop-up appears. So you can have ESV, which is the default, but you can also choose things like KJV, NIV, NLT, whatever you want from this list, and then that's what the scripture will show up as. And once you choose something, so if you change to NLT, that means the next time you post sermon notes, so when you post sermon notes for next week's sermon, it will automatically default to NLT, so it kind of tries to be what it thinks you want to have versus always making you switch to the version that you want to have. All right, so now we're ready to dive into the notes themselves. So down here is where you can start typing the notes. Before you start actually filling out the notes, what you will probably always want to do is choose this option right here, which is toggle side by side. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And you're seeing all this white screen. You're probably wondering yourself, why in the world did I have you do that? But you'll see in 1 second. So let's say the first point for the notes is going to be God's perfect plan includes imperfect people. So God's perfect plan includes imperfect people. All right, so that's going to be the first point of the sermon, and you could see as I was typing it out, it filled out over here. So this is actually a live preview on the right-hand side of the screen of what the notes will look like in the app, whereas the left-hand side is the editor, and you'll quickly see the editor gets all kinds of symbols thrown in and such, which indicates to the live version what it should actually look like. So first of all, this is our first point in the notes. We're probably going to want it to be pretty big, and not just normal text. So in order to do that, you can add a hashtag. And what a hashtag does is the same sort of thing on a web page, what like an H1 or an H2 or an H3 tag does. It makes the text really big, sort of big, big, medium, and as you add more and more hashtags, it gets smaller and smaller. So it's like H1, H2, H3, and it'll get smaller and smaller. So that way it gives you control over having different size of text. So let's go with 2 hashtags, get sort of a pretty big size text there for our header point. Something else you can do is for any text in the sermon, you can also make any text bold or italics. So I'm going to go ahead and select perfect, and you can see up here I have the ability to make something bold or italic, but also I can just use keyboard shortcuts like for on a Mac, Command I and Command B, or on a PC, Control I or Control B. So on my Mac, I'm going to do Command I, and you can see right there, it made it italic for me. And over here, you can see it's italic as well. And already you're starting to see what I'm talking about, where you're seeing symbols showing up here and here, whereas over here in the live version, it just looks really nice. It got bigger because of the hashtags, and it got italic because of the asterisks. But don't be tempted to go ahead and start deleting stuff to make it look nice over here in the editor, because as you delete stuff, the live version doesn't know what to do with it any longer. So you can see it kept the right asterisk, but it's no longer italicized because it doesn't know what to do with it. So if I add the asterisk back in, now it knows that it's supposed to be italicized. So now we've got our top point. We have some formatting on it. Let's go ahead and add our first scripture. So our first scripture is going to be Genesis 32. So Genesis 32, 24 through 30. So right now, I have that written out. It's a valid scripture. So in the app, once this is saved and live, that will actually show up as a hyperlink, like I mentioned, and someone could tap it and it will pull up the scripture in ESV in a pop-up because we chose ESV. But let's say I want to have this scripture actually show up in line within the sermon notes. What I can do is copy it, go over here to my browser, type, let's see, we wanted ESV, right? So I'm going to type ESV, and I'll just take the top option because the top option is almost always going to be right, and it's probably going to be Bible Gateway. I can take it, copy it, go back here, and go ahead and paste it in, and boom, I have my scripture right here ready to go. And something else you can do cool is to make it so it really sticks out, because you're going to probably have bullet point 1, bullet point 2, bullet point 3, and have scripture kind of mixed in among that. And sometimes it's really helpful to be able to have the scripture be very obvious that it is scripture, and you can tell it apart just by glancing. So what you can do is highlight all of this and then go up here, and right here you have block quote. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and you can see it changes the formatting just on the section I had highlighting, in this case being the scripture, and it makes it look really nice by making it a little lighter and kind of adding an indent into it, like a left margin, to make it really stick out and very obvious and separate from the rest of the area of the notes. You can see over here on the editor side, it added in all these greater than symbols, so it made it hideous, but that's not what people are going to see, and that's what indicates over here to the live version what it should look like. So once again, don't go start deleting these greater than symbols unless you just want to delete the section altogether. All right, so next up, let's add our first major points. Let's do 1, and let's make it God will take us backward so we can move forward. God will take us backward so we can move forward. And you can see as I'm typing that, it's actually filling it out over here in the live version as I'm going. So let's start talking about some of the neat things you can add in so that people that are actually using your sermon notes on Sunday morning can actually interact with the sermon. First of all, you have fill in the blanks. So this is the option to add a blank which people can fill in. So let's go ahead and make it so people can fill in the word backward. So I removed the word backward, and I'm going to go up here and I just clicked this, and it added in a blank here, and this is what it will show up in the live version of the sermon. And since this is live, I can actually go ahead and click it, and I can I can fill it in just like someone could do in the live sermon notes. So God will take us backwards so we can move forward. That's what it would look like as someone fills it in. So that's a standard blank. And if someone were to miss that part of the sermon, let's say they weren't paying attention, they walked in late for whatever reason, they'll have no idea what goes there. But you can have a different kind of blank which actually lets them be able to find out what should go there if they weren't able to follow along or missed it or something. So let's go to forward and get rid of the word forward. Then I'm going to select this item, which is a fill in the answer with set answer field. When I select this, you can see there's a little check mark next to it. And this area, you have your blank, and then this area within the parentheses is where you indicate what the answer should be. So you're going to want to get rid of the text that says answer. And remember, this should say, God will take us forward so we can, God will take us backwards so we can move forward. So this should be forward. So the answer is forward. And then now over here, all that someone needs to do is select this check mark, and boom, it fills in what the correct answer is. So if someone were to miss it or not be there for whatever reason, they could have that filled in for them. So someone could be here filling in backward, so we can move backward, and they could be like, man, that doesn't seem right. I must have misheard what the pastor said. So all they could need to do, select the check mark, and boom, it will change it to the right answer. So I know that for some churches it's going to make sense just to use regular blanks, the fill in the blanks, and for some churches it's going to make sense to always use fill in the blank with an answer field. So you can mix and match these like what you see here, or you can just use exclusively one or the other. But either way, it's a very powerful tool for people to be able to fill in answers as they're going along with the sermon. So there's one more type of object that someone can interact with, and that is the user note field. So I'm going to go ahead and just throw one of those in here, and you can see it adds a space where people can actually add their own note. So the power of this is you could have point number 1 and then maybe a scripture or a little sub point for it, but then someone's probably going to want to take their own personal notes. They're not going to just want to be able to fill in blanks, and what this does is it gives them an area to take personal notes, and this area will actually expand as they're filling it out. So they can take virtually infinite notes in that area, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph if they want, or just a few sentences, but it gives them ability to take notes on that section of the sermon. So the thing that I personally find that works best is you could have point 1, maybe a scripture, and then a fill in the note section like this. And then you can have a point 2, scripture, and then a note. I mean, obviously you might not go point 1, point 2, but whatever makes sense, make sure to add these notes in where you think people would want to take notes on your message, or maybe you just want to have a note section at the bottom of the sermon. But the power of putting these notes in line wherever you want them to be. So I could put down here 2, and let's just say, rather than being hindered by our past, we can be driven by it. Rather than being hindered by our past, we can be driven by it. So now we have point number 2. So this allows us to have a note on that one, and then I can go down here and add another note right here. So now someone can take notes on both of these sections of the sermon. And we can even say, let's get rid of driven. Oops, on the wrong side. Let's get rid of driven, and let's go ahead and make that a fill in the blank. And it's that easy. Now, driven is a blank. It's not a blank that will be automatically filled because I didn't choose that. So this is a blank someone has to pay attention for to get it in there. But now I so easily added in another section, just made part of it a blank. And here's another note where people can take personal notes on that section. Now, when someone emails these notes to themselves after the message is over, the blanks that they have filled in, as well as the personal notes, will appear inside that email where they took them. So remember, I said you could include a note block at the very bottom, but that means all of their notes are just going to be kind of clustered down there together, and it's going to be kind of hard to tell what note they took had to do with what part of the sermon. Whereas if you actually put them in like this, they can take notes on each section, and then when they reference their notes later on, they can easily tell where they took what note and what they were actually referencing in the sermon. One last thing I want to point out is you have the ability to actually add images in line. And the thing about this is sometimes you'll have a guest speaker and they want to show a picture of their family. Sometimes you'll have a diagram that you just want to be able to show that will help, explain the sermon a little better. So as an example, we're talking about forest. Let's say we want to show a picture of a tree. So I'm going to once again go to Google, go to images, and let's just select this picture of a tree. I'm going to copy the image address once again and go in here. And this time I'm going to select this image block, and then where it says HTTP, I'm just going to overwrite that and put the image, and boom, you can see an image goes right there in line, and then I can just continue building sermon notes past that. If for some reason, let's say point 2 needed an image to go with it, I can just continue building my sermon and just keep building the sermon out like that. So once you are finished with the sermon, it is very important. Go up here and you see these arrows pointing out for toggle full screen. I'm going to go ahead and select that, and make sure that you go up here and press save. Super easy, but make sure you do it or the notes will not show up in the app. So now I'm going to go ahead and actually pull up the app and show you. This is the app running live on an iPhone, and I'm going to go ahead and reload. So here we go, we're reloading it. And now I'm going to go ahead and go to the sermon notes section, and there it is, Finding God in the Forest. And this is the one that I just created. You can see here's Pastor John, here's the date. There's the image in the background. You can see the image is cropped really nicely, and the text is designed so it's easy to read it over the image. And as I scroll, remember we talked about how it's going to be a hyperlink for the scripture, and then here's the scripture, and you can see it's block quoted over. It's easy to tell it apart from this because of the way it's block quoted over. All right, that gives you a great walkthrough for how sermon notes works. Have a great day.